So I know that it's just after lunch. So first of all, we're going to fight two major agents of the industry. So first of all, how much do you know about OpenTelemetry or observability in general? Oh, there's two hands. Oh, shush. Okay, it's going to be hard for me. No, it seems that you have knowledge. So are you ready for some fighting here? I don't hear it. Come on. Are you ready for some fighting? All right, let's start then. All right, so my name is Henrik. I'm a cloud native advocate working at Dynatrace. It's been about 4 years now that I'm working at Dynatrace. Focused on open source, observability, and Kubernetes and everything. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. Yeah, I'm very glad that I spent 4 years with the cloud native community, which is an amazing community. But prior to that, I spent my entire career as a performance engineer. So testing, breaking, tuning. At the end, it's pretty much fun because breaking things is usually you're very proud of yourself when you break things. So performance is still in my heart, so that's why I try to produce content when I have time on a podcast / YouTube channel called Perf. So if you want to check out methodology, check it out. And otherwise, I have started less than 4 years. A YouTube channel called Is It Observable? You have it in the title, Is It Observable? And it's content about observability in general. So check out the link here. So before we start, small disclaimer. So to be able to produce this content, I had to run some tests, and I can guarantee that no birds, no telescope has been harmed. I was very gentle with those tools. They was pretty much working properly. The other thing is that this talk is not aimed to blame any of those CNCF projects, Fluent Bit or the OpenTelemetry Collector. I'm a big fan of both communities. In the opposite, the idea of this talk is to share feedback to the community and also help you to figure out which agent you should at least pick and choose. All right, so are you ready? Let's introduce the fighters. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, on the right side corner, we have Ryu from the Fluent Dojo, trained by his big brother, Fluent D, very specialized into logging. So he's been born in the logging fashion, but he was designed initially for edge devices, so very small agent, very lightweight. And since Fluent Bit version 2, they started to support metrics and traces. So that's why we're going to benchmark both of the solutions. And on the left side corner, we have Ken from the OpenTelemetry Dojo. He's been basically born by traces, and then he followed the support for OpenTelemetry. So then once metrics were out, he supported metrics, and then once logs was out, he supported logs, of course. And now, if you pay attention, they have an experimental version for profiling. So if you want to process profiling data, the collector can do that as well. All right. So if we stay here, I hope that you're going to stay with me on the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to compare both solutions based on the design perspective, and we're going to look at, after that, the support for logging, what are the features we need, what they are providing to us. Same thing for the metrics, and same thing for the traces. And last, because it's a benchmark, at the end, if you're patient, you have to stay until the end, we'll share some numbers about how much resources they are consuming in our cluster, because here it's in a Kubernetes environment. All right. So I need your help, because otherwise I won't be able to deliver that talk. So when I say round, then you say the title, okay? Round one. I think the next one you need to be better, because otherwise it's going to be boring. All right, so design. As any observability agents that are in the market, it relies on a pipeline file. So those processes start, load the pipeline file, and then it will achieve some processing. And the pipeline structure really depends on each agent. So in the Fluent Bit world, you start with input. So you have a thread for inputs. Then you have another thread called parser, then a thread for filtering, and then last output to export the actual data. Since Fluent Bit version 2, they introduce, with the support of metrics and traces, a processor. The processor is basically you can connect to the same thread as the input or the output. You can do some modification on the fly. So very efficient, very fast, because you're taking advantage of the multi-thread architecture that Fluent Bit has. On the other side, the collector has different naming, so receiver for receiving, processor for processing, and exporter to export. And they have another component called connectors that is basically a receiver and an exporter, but we'll touch base this in a few minutes. And then we have extensions. It's another different color because it doesn't touch the actual, it doesn't have access to the data. So it's basically more enhancing the actual component more than anything else. On the pipeline side, on a design way, the collector, the structure, the logic is going to be the same for logs, metrics, traces, and profile. But when it comes to Fluent Bit, it's a bit different. Logging has the ability to utilize the notion of parser and filter that comes from the Fluentd world. So, but when it comes to metrics and traces, you don't have filter and parser. So every plugin that you can see in Fluent Bit related to filtering, parsing, they won't be available and accessible for metrics and traces. So you will only have processors for those signals. Now, if you, on the Fluent Bit side, it's one of the features that were available in Fluentd. They had a very smart feature called tagging. So when you receive things, you can tag the source. Oh, I'm receiving kubelet, I'm going to tag kubelet. Or I'm receiving a file from Kubernetes, I'm going to tag it Kubernetes. And the objective of that is that when you apply a plugin, then the plugin will say, oh, I'm going to apply my plugin only on the tag, the data that match that tag. So it was like an if then else condition without having to code that if and else. So very smart. So at the end, with few lines of code, or pipeline, sorry, you can do very complex things in Fluent Bit. The collector, of course, doesn't have that notion of tagging, but it has the notion of connectors, and specifically the routing connector. The routing connector is basically say, oh, this source comes from Istio, or then I'm going to trigger the Istio pipeline to process the Istio logs properly. So then at the end, you can do very complex things, but it means that you will have to define lots of pipelines. So the files that you will have to deal with will be much more bigger than the Fluent Bit files. So, and then the Fluent Bit format went from a transitioning. So this is the old traditional TOML format that Fluentd used to have. So it's like you have a section, so input, parser, whatever. And within the name of the section, you say which plugin I want to use. So name here it's tail. And then you configure the actual plugin. So, and the order of the pipeline is pretty much sequential. It follows the order of the file. And since Fluent Bit 2, with the introduction of metrics and traces, it went to a YAML format. So if you want to take advantage of processing, take advantage of fast processing of data, then you have to transition to YAML. So if you use still TOML, then it's time to move. The collector, has a different approach, where here you have 3 sections, receiver, processors, and exporters. You basically list the different plugins that you need. You just configure them without putting any logic behind the scenes. And then in the bottom of the pipeline, you will find a service section with the pipelines. And you can find out here is my log pipeline, here is my metric pipeline, here's my trace pipeline. And this is where you're going to define the actual flow. So I'm receiving that data, and then I'm going to process that way. So I think from the design perspective, there's no differences. It's just being used to one tool or the other. So from my perspective, I like the collector because I use it quite a lot. So I have these small preferences, but Fluent Bit, I can do the same thing if I want. So namely, no major winner on that specific round. So round 2. OK, next time it's going to be better. All right, logging. So what do we need when we deal with logs? First, we need to support the most common protocol that basically allow you to receive logs. So it's going to be UDP, TCP, Fluent Forward, which is the protocol for Fluentd and Fluent Bit, syslogs, OpenTelemetry logs, of course, which is the open standards, Kafka, because it's probably going to utilize a Kafka queue behind the scenes, and then, of course, reading a log from a file. Both agents support those plugins, so no problem. If you look at the actual repo, you can find that the collector has more plugins, but at the end of the day, I don't care. I mean, I can do 98% of my use case with this. The rest is just, I don't know. I don't know where it is. But yeah, if you want to use those, you can use it. But what do you want to do with the logs? So receiving is great, but then what we want to achieve, what we want to achieve is basically enriching that log. So adding Kubernetes metadata, host metadata. We want to be able to filter the logs by dropping assets. We want to parse those logs. And then at the end, both agent has the similar, not the same name of the plugin, of course, but they have the support. One thing that I think from a parsing perspective, Fluent Bit relies on Ruby regex. So if you're not used to Ruby regex, then it's going to be quite difficult. But it has a lot of predefined parsers, which is very efficient. The collector, they has built a language called OTTL, Open Telemetry Transform Language. Very efficient, very powerful. But from the user experience, when you design your pipeline, then yeah, it's going to be a mess. But if you are used to that, then you'll see that it's very, very, very powerful. So I think from a log perspective, I'll have a slightly preference to Fluent Bit. For one reason, you will see when we touch base with the performance, because Fluent Bit is insane for processing logs, and that's why he has this reputation on the market. But the collectors does pretty much a good job as well on that area. So round 3. Good. Thanks. So metrics. We need a couple of standardized protocol. For that, we need, of course, to be able to support collectd, statsd, Prometheus. We need to have the support of OpenTelemetry metrics. And we need to also get some metrics from the host, so either on the bare metal environments or in Kubernetes through kubelet or Node exporters. Both agents has everything we need. I will put just a small negative points on Fluent Bit. It doesn't support scrape config. So building the scraping the information from with Fluent Bit is going to be a bit more difficult. Having a scrape config would be a plus for sure. And then when it comes to metrics, what do you want to achieve? Simple, same thing. We want to enrich the metrics to add some extra metadata. We want to basically control the cardinality of the metrics. If the metric is super high cardinality, we want to drop dimensions. We want to be able to convert metrics, because I don't know if you were, but there's 2 standard of format of metrics in the industry. You have cumulative, Prometheus and the others, and you have statsd. So if you scrape something, depending on your backend, you will have to convert it. So it's very important to be able to convert. So if you look at the support on those use cases, the collector has everything that we need. That's perfect. Fluent Bit has labels. Labels can allow you to change labels, to drop labels, so control the cardinality at the end. You can also filter with metric selector, but at the end, no metric conversion. So that is a big negative point from my end. The collector is way much better on the metrics. So that for sure, collector is the clear winner on that side. So round 4. Traces, yeah. All right, so for traces, of course, we need to be able to ingest traces from different protocol. OpenTelemetry is the open standards. Supporting it makes sense. But there are still out there old apps that produce Zipkin, OpenCensus. So having that support is a plus Kafka. Collector has obviously everything, because it's a champion on that side. The Fluent Bit here is mainly on the OpenTelemetry side. That's the only thing. When it comes to processing the logs, the traces, we need to, of course, similar to the other, enrich them. But also we need to control sampling. Collector or Fluent Bit could allow you to sample and especially do tail sampling. Tail sampling means I take all the best bands and I apply a rule and then I sample from there. And since Fluent Bit version 4 that was released at KubeCon Europe a couple of months ago, they have now sampling decisions in Fluent Bit. So it is not perfect for Fluent compared to the collector. It's not perfect, but it does, let's say, 90% of the job. Whew, I'm going to run now. All right, so round 5. All right, so let's be performed because I have 5 minutes still left. So what are the pipelines that I wanted to compare? So I did a couple of tests here. I did tests with only logs. Then I did a test with logs and traces. And here for traces, I didn't do anything, just a simple gateway. And then I did logs, traces, and metrics. And here metrics, what I've done is I scrape the metric, and then I was reducing the cardinality. And last, I did some tests with sampling using the support of tail samplings on both agents. For this, I need a specific architecture, so you have the QR code to the GitHub repo if you want. I have a daemon set for the logs, Fluent Bit, and I have a stateful set. This is going to be more for sampling. And how did I do the load test? Simple. I need 2 demo apps, Hotel Demo and Hipster Shop. And then I use Istio, because Istio is going to add spans on every single transaction, incoming and outgoing transactions. And also Kepler as an exporter, because it's an expensive exporter with lots of cardinality. And we have also all the node exporters, kubestat metrics, and so on. So if I apply load on those applications, then they will produce more logs, and they will produce more traces. So then I will have more traces to process and more logs to process. On the collector with similar architecture, here I have a daemon set, but you'll see we will slowly change it. And I will explain that with the numbers. So let's look at the numbers. If I do the ramp-up tests during 2 hours, you can see that the logs coming in on the graph on the top is increasing with the load. And in terms of resources, Fluent Bit is more efficient. But then in terms of, in terms of memory, there is about 18 megs difference. The Fluent Bit consumes about 15 to 20 megs. The collector is about 80 to 120 megs in general. Now, if I start adding traces, no major differences. I still see the same conclusions. And then I add the metrics. And here, when I started adding metrics here, I saw that, whoa, the collector is start to consume lots of memory. That sounds weird. So then I said, OK, I'm going to do a soak test, so 24 hours. And here during the soak test, you can see on the bottom here is the memory. The collector reached 10 gigs, crash, rerun, consume 10 gigs, crash, and so on. I say, wow. So then I open an issue, say, hey, there's a memory leak on the Prometheus receiver. That sounds strange. So what we do say, OK, maybe let's investigate. So we generate some P profiles. By looking at the P profiles, we saw that the problem was not Prometheus, but it was cumulative to delta, because I had to convert those metrics. And because I was using daemon set, I was basically put the pressure on the collector. So if you deploy a collector in a bad way, like I did, then you get those behaviors. So then I rerun the tests in a stateful set, one collector just for metrics and traces, and you can see that, it's flat and behaving like a good thing. So which means the architecture is very important. Now, what about sampling? Well, let's have a look at it. So sampling, very easy. For this, I did one stateful set Fluent Bit instance for sampling metrics and traces, one daemon set for logs, and then I had to go through a collector to do the metric conversion because Fluent Bit doesn't have it. And then on the collector side, I did one daemon set for logs, one stateful set that was dealing with metrics and the enrichment, and then I was load balancing to one instance, so it's not really load balancing, but I was basically sampling on a dedicated instance of the collector. So now I'm going to show you the numbers only from the sampling components from both agents. So here in this test, it's 9 hours or 10 hours, I don't remember. The purpose is that I'm going to have 50 users, and then I will spike. So you can see the spike on the traces and on the logs on both ends. And if you compare the numbers, first of all, remember Fluent Bit was consuming about 15 megs. Now I'm around 800 megs. So tail sampling is clearly impacting components. And then if I look at the collector difference with the collector, I have about 1.5 gig difference. So the collector is consuming way much memory than the Fluent Bit instance. So short, 2 minutes. All right. So for this, I would say, if you look by looking at all the numbers, I would say if you have to deal with logs, having an agent that consumes few millicores and just a couple of megs of memory, then go for Fluent Bit. It's going to be insane. It's going to be stable, and it's going to do even supporting edge devices. But if you start to deal with metrics and traces, and you need to apply more complicated logic, then the collector for sure. So I won't have 2 agents in my environments because I need to deal with 2 different pipelines, 2 different skills. So yeah, if you pick one, stay with one, because at the end it will do the job. Small teaser with my YouTube channel. Is it observable? I have a lot of episodes there. I will release probably in 2 weeks, I think, or I don't remember, a dedicated episode about Fluent Bit version 4 that introduces tail sampling. And if you have any questions, I think I have a few seconds left to answer for any questions.
Yeah, we have enough time for one question. Who's going to be the one?
Don't be shy. Did I kill you, or?
I think there was a lot of really great information, and thank you very much. Appreciate it. You'll be around here if anyone has any questions. Yeah,
sure.
Excellent. All right.